That's why it's so popular. Dan Brown's
butt muscles.
The accuracy of his Hello Booktube, I'm Scott.
And now
We are Gunpowder, Fiction and Plot, and today we're doing a tag video. What's it called? This is the Pain Over Joy reading tag.
This is so our kind of tag.
This was created by Jessica over at Lady Lovestead Reads. Now, if you're not already following Jessica, check her out. She is a really interesting reader. And I'm going to tell you two things about Jessica that I think basically sums up her reading taste. She is a university college professor. She has written a YA fantasy novel. But she's an excellent booktuber and very much worth checking out. And she's created this really interesting tag about the idea that as readers, we value books that discuss pain more than books that discuss joy. And she's going to ask us some questions about that. Now, are we doing the cool thing and tagging people first, or are we tagging people at the end?
I mean, yeah.
Because this is about pain and joy, I thought I would tag booktubers who get joy from reading about misery.
Okay.
So I'm going to tag Sean the book maniac, and Jen the librarian. I also think that Courtney Farrader, Roz from Skelly Dandling about the book, and Brian from Bookish will make excellent and really interesting discussion videos.
Yeah.
Finally, there are 5 booktubers that I thought of that I think are really good.
Just going crazy with
I'm tagging 10 people.
Every bastard's it. Yep.
I'm tagging 10 people. I think from their videos that they're very good at prioritizing happiness in their life. So firstly, I'd like to tag Natabi.
Yes.
She is a relatively new booktuber, a South African booktuber, and very much worth checking out. Just a brilliant channel, and one that I don't know if many people know about in our circle. So go check her out. Brilliant.
But definite hedonist vibes from Natabi.
I think that Emma from Drinking by My Shelf is a massive hedonist.
Yes.
And I'd like to tag her. I think that Dani at Spenelli Speaks, I think she is really good at knowing how to be silly and have fun.
Yeah, you can tell just, yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to say by her face, but that sounds really offensive. You know what I mean.
I think you just like the video where it was her birthday really like sums up just how sensible Dani is. I think Olivia Savannah is just full of joy and is really good at that. It's Stephanie from Time to Read, because she is just you can see her being happy or sad or whatever when she...
Because she is whatever she is.
Yeah, she is. I think that...
If they gave Booktube Awards, I think she would get the one for Cries Most on Film.
Yeah, she's just a brilliant booktuber. All 10 of these booktubers are brilliant. They are 10 booktubers that we watch everything they do. And big shout out to those 10. Big shout out to Jessica at Lovestead Reads as well. Excellent book.
Lady Lovestead Reads.
Do you mostly read books illustrating pain or books illustrating joy, and why? I mostly read books that illustrate pain. I really enjoy those books more. I am a complete snob in that I like books that illustrate pain over joy.
Interesting. I don't consider the joy-pain equation when selecting books. I definitely enjoy joyful books more than Scott enjoys joyful books. I actually think that is that category of books that you know that I'm going to like that you didn't like. They're too happy. Whether they have too happy an ending or they spend too much time in a happy place before they get to the conflict or after they get to the conflict, he doesn't resonate with those ones as much as I do, I think.
Yeah, shit books. Yeah, I don't resonate.
They're not shit. They do have a tendency that I think they're more common in YA. I think they're more common in women's fiction versus literary fiction. And I think if you're a snob, then you would potentially be saying that literary fiction is greater than women's fiction. But I think that makes you both a misogynist. And I don't think that comparing the value of genres to the value of other genres is valid. And I think that if you do so, you're only doing so to make yourself feel more intellectual than another person, which just makes you a snob.
Yeah. I think that there is comparing the genres for yourself, though. Like, if you...
Yeah, your preferences, but that doesn't mean that one is more valuable than the other or one is better than the other.
Yeah. It's better to you, but it's not better. It's not a better book. And
I think the word better is...
It's like the scope of the book is not necessarily matching up with what you want in a book.
Sure.
Okay. Well, the second part of this question was just why. I feel that when we talk about like misery in books, it gives us a chance to relate to these characters, and what a lot of characters go through is often a much more extreme experience of what we go through ourselves.
Okay, so I'm just going to circumvent this conversation. I think you're wrong. I think the thing that people relate to misery and pain in books is conflict. I think the fact is that a plot can't move forward without some kind of conflict, and we associate that conflict with a character being in discomfort. You're not going to have an argument with your mum and get kicked out if you're not in some kind of discomfort in the original situation. So you're moving from potentially a pain state to either a pain state or a joy state. That's really how a plot progresses. Yeah?
Sure, yes.
Yes. So there's this perception that books that focus more on joyful things contain no conflict, and therefore have either not interesting plots or plots that, like the Night Circus, plots that don't have any, what's the word I'm looking for?
Plot. Sorry. But yeah, any catalyst.
Urgency.
Yeah.
There's no real bad outcome, I guess. There's no real skin in the game.
Yeah.
And I think that that's fucking wrong. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples. One's a book and one's a movie. I'm sorry. So for me, when I think of joyful reads, one of the things that I think of is the Wayward Children series. Now, the Wayward Children series is not without conflict, and it certainly has... it's certainly very plot driven, and there's lots of skin in the game. Like, people die and stuff. Like, it's not a uninteresting story, but it spends a lot of time focusing on the joy of found family and the feeling. I think this is why a lot of queer folk really love the series, is because it spends a lot of time like nestled in that feeling of finding your people and loving them and being loved by them, and it spends a lot of time in that warm cuddly place, even if that warm cuddly place is currently out on a quest to like kill a vampire. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that's example number one. I think that is a really good example of joy being ever present in a book that has a lot of conflict. It's also an example of one you didn't like, and I did.
I never read it.
Oh, didn't you?
I've not read it, no.
The other example I want to use, I know you won't have watched because Scott doesn't really watch movies, but I am obsessed with the movie The Intern.
Never even heard of this movie.
The movie The Intern is Anne Hathaway and Robert De Niro.
This one, you watch it all the time.
I do. I literally watch this movie all the time. I love this movie. Anne Hathaway is boss bitch, CEO, fucking rock star. And she hires interns in her online business. And one of the interns, they decide to have a senior intern program. And Robert De Niro, this old man who has run businesses and, you know, he's in his 60s and his wife's dead and all that sort of stuff, becomes her intern. And he ends up being her PA. And it's about their professional relationship and also their friendship. This movie for me, like, there's conflict and there's sad bits and stuff, but for me it's so uplifting because it is an hour and a half, 2 hours of watching a woman fucking rock it. And there are so few examples for me as a woman who runs a business of women running businesses in movies and just fucking kicking ass and not getting bogged down in the gender issue and not being and the whole movie not being about the gender issue. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's actually just, it's not even really a big deal that she's the boss. She's just the fucking boss because that's how it is. And the joy that I get from that representation is huge. And I think it's the major part of the movie for me. I'm sure other people like the plot, but that is just euphoric. And I think that that's really important in books. And I think a lot of people who come from minorities or who have parts of their lives that aren't often reflected in mass media read for that visibility, which is a joyful thing and not about pain at all.
Yeah, okay.
So, what was the actual question?
It was, why do you read books that illustrate pain or joy?
I'm not saying that books about pain have no value. I'm just saying that books about joy also have value for me. So, yeah. And that's two examples of why.
Well, I think you basically said that what I was about to say was wrong, and I definitely don't agree with that part of what you said. I don't think that you're wrong either, but I was saying that for me, myself, reading stories about misery makes all the struggles that I go through in my life feel valued and normal and seen and heard. Even if those struggles are not struggles that I personally have, I can usually relate to most things in some way a little bit.
Yeah.
And it allows me to empathise with the similarities and the differences in somebody else's struggle. Because even though I am like the epitome of privileged, I am still a minority because I am not rich, essentially, because...
I don't think that makes you a minority, but it does make you disadvantaged.
Yeah, okay. I'm still disadvantaged because I'm not rich. And basically, one thing that we should all know is that every form of bigotry is exaggerated by our capitalism and class.
Well, and intersectionality in general. I also think it's interesting that of the two of us, personality type-wise, you are very much the pessimist of the two of us. And I am very much the Pollyanna of the relationship.
Yeah.
So, I definitely seek joy in my life more than you seek joy in your life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just like books that acknowledge that the world is shit.
Yeah, and I don't disagree that the world is shit.
Yeah.
So...
Question 2. Do you see books about pain as more intellectually valuable? Why or why not? Now, this is something that I initially want to say no about, which is really, this is what you discussed before.
Yeah, I think this is what I was talking about before.
But I definitely think that society sees books that about pain as more valuable. And I definitely see as a reflection of that societal bias that I kind of then end up associating books about pain with more value, because that is us, you know, like...
Yeah.
I'm sort of... I don't see that there is anything preventing a book about joy winning the Booker Prize, for example. That said, Shuggie Bain was about an alcoholic woman who didn't treat her son right. You know, it's a sad book. It won the Booker Prize last year. You know, like, name me a book about joy that's done well in one of these major prizes for literary fiction.
I mean, I guess the point is, do you think that's correct? Not, is that the current standard? And I don't think that's correct. And I do think that the classification of more joyful books as even Eleanor Oliphant is completely fine, is a completely miserable book, but it's actually very joyful.
Well, I think the discussion about whether Eleanor Oliphant is a joyful or is a book about joy or a book about pain is actually a really interesting discussion.
I think it's both. I think it's completely both. But I think that it is relegated to women's fiction or book club fiction rather than literary fiction because of the elements of joy in it.
Yeah, I think that's complete rubbish as well. Eleanor Oliphant is an excellent book.
Yeah, totally.
And if you haven't read it, you should read it. And if you didn't like it, your opinion is wrong. No, if you didn't like
Welcome to Gunpowder Fiction and Plot, where Scott tells you you're wrong.
No, that's all right. You're allowed to disagree with me about books because that's what's interesting.
Oh, that's what I'm supposed to say.
Get me out of this whole PR. What's the comment I meant to say? I'm sorry if you were offended by my comment.
All right, next.
I think I just want, like, if writers out there view pain as more valuable than joy, then there is going to be more books about pain.
I think the fact is it's easier to create conflict and plot from pain. Like I think it's easier. I think it's more complex and difficult to create a situation of joy where something needs to change and a plot needs to move forward.
Well, what about happily ever after versus they all die at the end?
I think that there is an element of modern society that values... No. I think a lot of us value a certain amount of realism when it comes to our reading, and I think happily ever after, thanks to Disney, and I guess other factors, like the world being a piece of shit, it doesn't seem real.
Yeah.
And I think that is, like, why joy needs to be either an ongoing part of the book or part of the setup rather than necessarily the ending. I actually have it, like, in all the joyful books that I've talked about, it's not really the ending where I find the joy. Yeah.
I think that this is going to narrow back into something that we think pain is more realistic because we're actually going to end up valuing pain more than joy because the world is a pile of shit.
Because life is pain. Yeah, and the other thing, like, both of us really value like political discussion, showing us viewpoints that we don't recognise, and as white, relatively well-off people, a lot of the world that we don't see is the poor, broken, shitty part. You know, like, so if you're going to educate us on space we don't understand, then it's going to be the poor, broken, shitty part.
Yeah, how can
Sometimes.
you read... Like, I guess...
I mean, that's very broad strokes.
We both really like political fiction, and how do you read is there such thing as joyful political fiction? The revolution won and like cut off the head of the dictator. Is that joyful?
I mean, yes.
Is that?
And they shot her leg out of a cannon.
And they polished the guillotines and used them again the next day. Yeah.
I mean, is building like some kind of theoretical utopia is that a joyful book? I mean, it never turns out to be, because it always has a bleak, you know, in every book I can think of that tries to do that.
Is what? Sorry?
Like building some kind of utopia in your fiction. Like, the utopia always has a bleak side.
Okay, so like like a famous utopia is Huxley's Brave New World.
Yeah.
Which was a utopian novel, not a dystopian novel in my opinion, but Huxley was definitely asking the question about what is utopian and dystopian, and
I mean, it was pretty dystopian.
everybody was happy because they were high.
Yeah, except for the people who were jumping off the sides of buildings.
Every society has got its miscreants. Okay.
It's got some miscreants.
Sorry. But I thought that it was meant to be utopic, and then it was meant to show you that that didn't work.
Yes, I guess that's really what I'm talking about, yeah.
Yeah. Look, let's go into the third question because we've already discussed it.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think major book prizes like the Booker and the Pulitzer mainly award books about pain? So I think we've discussed this about when we've talked about realism already.
Yeah, I think it's about conflict. I think it's about realism. I think it's about. I also think it's about intellectual fodder, which usually centers on some kind of societal point of view, and that is usually a problem and not a success. Like, we're not focusing on, I don't know, what's good about society. Is there something good we could focus on?
Something good about society?
Yeah.
Books?
Yeah, like, we're not focusing on how awesome it is that we can create books.
Yeah, about the miserable parts of society.
You know,
Yeah.
Yeah, next.
Do you use and agree with the phrase guilty pleasure, why or why not? Yeah, so in Jessica's video, she didn't just use the phrase guilty pleasure, she used the phrases trash and fluff, which are straight out of trash, fluff. These are words that we use all the time.
I just want to object to the phrase guilty pleasure. As a fat person, I find the phrase guilty pleasure thrown about like, oh, I just hate it. I hate it, I hate it, I hate it. It is imbued with so much shame, and it is always attached to things that should not be shameful. You can eat as much fucking cake as you like, no one cares. If you want to read a romance novel, no one fucking cares. No shame. No shame. Guilty pleasure is a shit word made to make other people feel bad about their choices. It's crap. I don't like it.
Yeah. I think in Jessica's video she was mainly talking about you using it yourself on something.
Yeah, but even you using it when you're talking about your stuff, what do you think that's making other people who participate in the same activity feel like?
Yeah, okay.
Like, you being a wanker and saying this is a guilty pleasure then imposes your shame on other people as well. It perpetuates it. It's shitty. It's like the word should. We should. It's like the word should. It is best if we eradicate it from our language.
Yeah. So, you're on the fence with this topic?
I'm on the fence. I do use the word trash. I use the word trash a little bit lovingly, though.
I do think it definitely, like, if I say I'm reading fluff or trash, I do think it says what I am getting out of the book.
It's very much, for me, a shorthand of this is not an intellectually challenging thing, but I am enjoying it.
Yeah, like, I've just read this shortlisted Booker Prize book, and now I'm going to read a fantasy or a comedy or something because I need a break. I'm just going to read some fluff.
Yeah.
But it is ultimately...
I mean, we could equally call it sorbet. We could
call it sorbet. It's a palate cleanser.
I feel like that's a much more healthy way to talk about it.
It does come with a level of judgment that this isn't real fiction, and it is real fiction.
I don't think that it's not real fiction. I just think it's different fiction.
Yeah, well, I don't think it's real. I don't. Yes.
I'm definitely being a bit tongue in cheek if I say something's trash.
Were you tongue in cheek when you said it about the Da Vinci Code?
No, that's actually a pile of poo. That's not something I would enjoy. That is something that someone has excreted from their anus.
It's really talented that he could write like that.
With
the
his
precision,
finger.
the training. Books centering joy are guilty pleasures.
I mean, I know. I just said I don't really agree with the guilty pleasure, and I openly like books about joy. So, no.
Guilty pleasures is.
Yeah. But I'm not ashamed of enjoying books that have joyful bits or center joy.
Yeah,
If they're good, they're good.
Yeah.
I think you would agree with that. You're just less likely to find them good.
No, I'm trying to think about. I really like P.G. Wodehouse. Does P.G. Wodehouse center joy or pain? It's certainly not centering pain in it, but what's he doing to create
Conflict
and joy? He's relying on social etiquette and misunderstandings and aunts bullying nephews and nephews accidentally assaulting police officers good-naturedly and having to pay the consequences of it. Those sort of things.
sounds anxiety-inducing to me.
It's not meant to be anxiety-inducing, though.
Yeah.
Anyway. I don't. I think that books centering joy are more likely to be guilty pleasures, but that it's not a hard and fast rule.
So you think they're more likely to fall into the trash category?
Yeah, totally.
I think that society puts them in the trash category because they center joy, but I don't think I necessarily do.
I think that it does go back to this whole topic. Goes back to this gatekeeping topic that's sort of going around now.
Yeah, I feel like it's sort of it's very interesting because literature and academia has always been, historically, been the domain of university discussion and it's
and
a lot of things, knowledge is being democratized by the internet and discussion is being democratized by social media.
Yeah, well, it's the same as when Tyndale translated the Bible, and that became a thing. Or I think Luther did it actually, and Tyndale did it for the English speakers. But whatever. Mm-hmm. The translation of the Bible, and it was about the ecclesiastics, and it was about everybody. But literature is a little bit. It's not as on and off. It's not,
No, because it's not one text.
But the idea that literary fiction is the only fiction of value is problematic. The question of what is literary fiction is a ridiculous. We all use the term. If I say I like reading literary fiction, we all know what sort of books I like.
Yeah.
But as we've already discussed it, Eleanor Oliphant, is that literary fiction or not?
Yeah, and if it was written by a man, would it be literary fiction or not?
Yeah, it certainly uses enough of the writing elements to be considered literary fiction. It definitely has more literary merit than other works that are considered literary fiction. Does it have as much merit as Burnt Sugar or James Joyce and it probably not, but when you sort of, isn't that such a shitty wankerish argument to rank books like that?
I also think there's when you're talking about this, there's difficulty of the techniques, the level of the execution, how well it's done, but also like the relevance of the techniques. And like sometimes literary fiction gets into the experimental for the experimental sake, which is not my fucking favourite.
Yeah.
And other times literary fiction is like specifically using literary techniques in order to further the discussion, and that's much more interesting to me.
Yeah.
And that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to use the hardest techniques or the most complicated or the most groundbreaking, because you're going to use the techniques that make most sense for whatever point you're trying to discuss. Does that mean that you're less valuable than the super experimental? I mean, I personally don't think so, but a lot of the sort of more academic discussions would imply as much.
One of the things I really value in the literary fiction that I read is accessibility. We just finished How the One-Armed Sister Sweeps Her House.
Yeah.
And the thing that I really liked about that book as a broad thing is that book is overwhelmingly very, very simple, and then it packs these simple ideas on top of each other to create something really complex and intellectual, but that everything in it is just so easy and simple to understand, and that really,
and then you're just onioning.
Yeah, like it could be commercial fiction, it could be a crime novel, it could be women's fiction, but it's literary fiction.
Yeah.
And yeah. So
yes,
but yeah, I think that accessibility is something that we don't value enough in books, and accessibility is not the opposite of intellectually stimulating, is my point.
No, and it's not necessarily the opposite of degree of difficulty either. Like, we definitely value these more experimental techniques as being more difficult to pull off. But actually, if you're layering a whole bunch of simple ideas in a way that comes across as a simple story, that takes a level of finesse that not many authors have. All of this, like, what is more important to value and what is, like, it's very easy to answer these questions when it comes to your own personal opinion, but then when you're trying to evaluate for sort of public discussion, public consumption, like when you're awarding a prize, or when you're putting a review out there to try and make recommendations and that sort of stuff, I think it's really important to consider which things that we value that are our own personal biases, and which things that we value because they're valuable, and which things that we value just so we can be snobs.
Yes. Do you read in secret? Are there books you read but never talk about because of embarrassment, shame, or guilt about liking them?
No.
No. Good. Well, I think that's a good spot to
leave it,
because it's bloody long already. Just one quick thing. I want to add somebody to the tag just because we've discussed this and I know that they'll have something very intellectual to say. I really want to know what Pay at Attention has to say on this topic, because I don't know what he'll have to say on it, but I know I'll enjoy what he makes.
Yeah.
So I'm going to add him to the people tagged. Go and check out all of those people tagged, please. They're all excellent channels if you haven't already. And if you were tagged and you don't want to create a video,
poo on you.
No stress. I've tagged enough people to hopefully get my tag video fix for the week. And check out Jessica's channel. She has created a wonderful tag here, in my opinion.
Yeah, this was fun.
Yeah. All right.
Okay, bye.
Bye. Have you got the mouse?
Have you got the mouse? I've got the mouse.
You've got the mouse.